What's going on, y'all? Eric Muldrow here with Code Red Conversations. I appreciate y'all for joining me at a time that isn't my usual time, but I believe that this topic, for anybody who's familiar with me, who's followed me for any length of time, you know how important it is for me to talk about media manipulation and how the narrative is constantly being, for lack of a better word or better term, being forced down our throats to believe and think one way or another. Those of y'all who know me know my story, how as a black man here in the United States, you are expected to be a Democrat. I often joke that when you're born, you get they smack you on the behind, they take your footprint when you're a young black person in the United States, and then they give you a Democrat registration card. It's like goes with the package. You're expected to lean left and to think that one side of the aisle in particular is the right way. And my story was that as I grew older and I just started seeing some things that just didn't look right throughout the course of my life, but the most impactful point for me was my Christian conversion in 2010, my true Christian conversion, because I lived most of my life making that proclamation, but I wasn't living it out. But once I really started following the teachings of Jesus, everything changed in my life. And I started examining my worldview and started seeing things completely different. And during some of my studies, when it came down to like the evolution, creation debate, I just started learning how words were used in a conversation. And then as a police officer, a 20 plus year law enforcement officer, I just started developing this mind. I just started examining the world completely different. So why do I say all that? Back to my main point, the conversation or the topic of manipulation in our society, whether it's from music or whether it's from the mainstream media, my eyes were truly open to it. And I've made a few videos over the course of the last few years, but a few weeks ago, on my timeline on YouTube, I come across this young lady whose most of her content is talking about that issue. And I just went on a little binge watch there, and I was just totally wowed by her content. And I felt as if, and when again, her content was so good. When I first came in contact with her, her page, she had like 800 followers. And then over the last month or so, she's jumped past me, and where are you at now, Vanessa?
Gosh, I don't know. I think I'm maybe 6,000 now.
Yeah, I'm telling you, and it's for a reason. It's for a reason. But without further ado, like I was saying, her content primarily deals with these issues. So without further ado, let me introduce to y'all Vanessa Mares. Did I say that properly?
Pretty much. Maris or some
Mares.
people.
Okay, I don't want
Yeah.
to get it wrong. What my last name, Muldrow. Trust me, I don't like jacking up. I don't like getting people's last name jacked up because mine always gets jacked up.
No, that's okay. That's good. I'm really happy to be here with you, Eric.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us today. And again, I think the audience will really appreciate the conversation that we have today. And so, just before we get into the meat of everything, Vanessa, could you tell our audience just a little bit about yourself? What's your background? Why did you choose to start having this conversation? Why did you choose to go to all the pains and headache of making a YouTube channel so you can talk about these issues?
Yeah, sure. Let me try to condense this. So I'm from California, Southern California. And I would say that it's been a journey. I would say that I first kind of went into the world of creativity with acting and filmmaking and screenwriting. I went to university and I got my degree there in film in media studies
Where did you
and
go?
went on UC Santa Barbara.
Okay.
Yeah. And then from there, I went to London for a couple years and I got my master's in creative writing, screenwriting, and playwriting. So I was very steeped in this world of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, I crossed over into marketing, and it was a journey, as I said. I also had a stint with photography as well. But then eventually I went to marketing, and I've been doing a lot of marketing maybe for the last 5 or 6 years now. And I think it's been really interesting because ever since I've been more into marketing, I started to realize a lot more about the psychology aspect of, I was very steeped in the creativity part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But then I realized, wow, there's a ton of psychology involved in selling. And, and then I just kind of have that whole background with media and filmmaking, and all of those worlds kind of combined.
Right.
And that's kind of what brought me to where I am now.
Okay. So, first of all, my condolences for living in Southern California. I'm just kidding. Speaking of which,
I
like,
like to
what's your current
I like
take
to
on
think,
what's your current take on California? Like everything that's
oh
going on.
gosh. Well, this is funny. I was going to say I like to think that I grew up in California at a time that it was maybe it's a bit nostalgic, but for
Mm-hmm.
me, I have a lot of really great fond memories of California. Um, and now I've been not living in California for about 4 years, so I go back and visit. But I will say, in the last, gosh, in the last maybe decade, it's just progressively gotten worse in a lot of ways.
No pun intended. Progressively gotten worse.
Progressively, right, right. But I do love California. California has my heart. It's home.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's been disheartening to see a lot of the ways that the state has gone downhill.
Right. Right. So, okay, I see that. So, as somebody who, like, I don't have nearly the background when it comes to marketing, I've just kind of gotten into it to some degree, just trying to
Yeah.
sell certain content. I created a video series that I sell that talks about, it's basically surviving, for lack of a better term, a police confrontation, like when you come in contact with the police. So in order to learn, I had to learn some of the in and outs when it comes down to marketing. So when you said that, that kind of intrigued me a bit, because I've learned that certain words have more power than others, even in creating YouTube content. When you're trying to create a title and a thumbnail, there's marketing that
Yeah.
goes on with that. So when you said that, that kind of was a bit intriguing. So what's the link between, what did you learn when you really, considering your background, and once you started examining the culture and then decided you wanted to start talk about that? Like, I want to know the bridge. Like, what was the thing that brought you, that made you say, hey, you know what, there's a lot going on here, I want to start talking about
Gosh, yeah, I think I feel like this has actually been a lot of, I could pull from a lot of threads to answer this question, because I think, as I said, it was a journey going from creativity then into marketing. And I think I would have to say that once I went into marketing, funnily enough, happened to overlap with more or less the same time of BLM and all of that.
that.
Uh, and and that was, so there was a lot happening in the country. And at the same time, I was learning marketing, and I was learning specifically copywriting. So I was, transferring my skills as a writer into writing for sales to sell. And, as the years have gone, I couldn't help but notice and really just see so clearly how, first, how to use words and how to use messaging and how to use storytelling, that, it was almost like I couldn't not see it. And at
Right.
some point, I got to the point that I was just like, well, I'm going to start teaching this, because I think maybe people might really benefit from, so many people in the media space are, frequently arguing over facts or arguing over their interpretation of something that happened. And I felt that, there's another layer here that we're missing, which is kind of that meta layer, the layer of like, let's look at first how it's all being constructed, and let's figure out how to understand what the purpose is or what the strategy is behind that.
Right.
In other words, how am I being steered to believe a certain way? And I just felt like, well, maybe I can create content and teach people how to see that just based off of what I've already learned myself.
Yeah, I think that, and that's one of the main points I want to hit on. Get your take at the near the end, considering what you know. How would and we don't have, I don't want to talk about this right now. I'm going to save it to the end, give folks something to wait on. How does one protect themselves from that media manipulation? Because honestly, one thing I posted on Facebook was just maybe a week ago. I said, this isn't necessarily, as much as I talk about my conservative values and how I'm very much a conservative, I say the lack of critical thinking has pretty much is universal, regardless of political affiliation. That's what I've noticed. A lot of people, if somebody posts something and they like it, they don't care if it's AI. They don't do their fact checking to determine whether it's true or not. They'll just repost it like it's well, I saw so and so said it, so it's got to be true. So that's something that is always that I see is the kind of universal that really, really like drives me nuts. But again, we'll save that for the end. But I want to know, what is like your overall take on this current political climate? What do you see? What are some of your takeaways, just off the top of your head? What are some of the takeaways, some of the things that you've noticed in the areas that you like to talk about when it comes to how the media and how, whether we're talking about the news networks or whether we're talking about Hollywood, the music industry, what's your take on the current political climate, and what impact or what role did this level of media manipulation have? Hopefully that was clear for you.
Yeah. Oh, great. Well, this is a great question. I think we're living in a really fascinating time, actually. I think that a lot of people are waking up, and a lot of people are really open to this conversation that we're having. And and by the same token, there's a lot of people that aren't. But I think that in the recent years, we've a lot of us have had our eyes open to the level of manipulation, and certainly, I mean, it can be so minor. I mean, just the way something is framed, that is already shaping how you feel about it or what you believe about it. And yeah, like I said, I think this is a great time. I think people are really open to this.
Mm-hmm.
But it is true, when you think about, I mean, I don't know how it is, but it's just, if you pull back a little bit and you zoom out, and this is something that I personally have to, kind of create a practice of doing. When you can zoom out and when you can emotionally disconnect from something, at least for a while, you can kind of get a clear view of, or at least a semi-clear view of what is happening. And when you do that, I think you realize that there's a ton of manipulation going on across the board, and now you have incentive structures for that. So, for instance, creators online, on social media, and the fact that algorithms, favor the extremities, it's like there's an entire incentive structure for that. It used to just be that legacy media had that same incentive and structure, and that was why they kind of were more sensationalized. But now we're seeing that in social media as well. So yeah, I think it's everywhere, and it's we all benefit from having our eyes open to that, I think.
Yeah, when you said divorcing or taking your emotion out of it, I was like, yeah, it's very hard. It's very difficult. I think that those of us who claim to be more conservative leaning, I think everybody thinks that they're the more analytical. I think that's pretty much across the board politically. We're the ones who think, and the old saying, conservatives have a mind. I forget what it is, but basically, like, we focus primarily, like, try to be analytical, whereas the left is more driven by their heart. And so I think it's hard to come to it. We know that's what we should do, or people should do when it comes to analyzing facts or information. But when you have people who believe that speech is violence, or who don't want to hear about facts, don't want to hear about it, I think it's easy. What I'm trying to say is it's easier said than done. It's easy to say, to want to. I'm not saying you're wrong. What you're saying, I agree 100% with. But when we see the outcome of it, when I'm having conversations with people, and as a Black conservative, I'm considered to some degree like, dude, like, what's wrong with you? How dare you side with the Klan? That type of thing. You know what I mean? How dare you side with, Adolf's buddies? That type of thing. They look at me like I have two heads. People look at me like I have two heads, and they're not, many of them, I'm not saying it's universal, but it's becoming more and more of a problem that people don't even want to hear what I have to say, because though it'll be bootlicker, Uncle Tom, house N-word, and all that kind of stuff, there's not even room for a conversation. And I think that perspective is celebrated more or promoted more. They're not even, it's the mindset that people like us aren't even worth talking to. And we're seeing more of a dehumanization. You don't even, that, as a primary example, what happened with Charlie Kirk.
Right.
The dude is up there having conversations with people. He said controversial things, no doubt about it, but I guess it's controversial based on your perspective. He never said, I didn't always agree with everything he said, but I largely agreed with a lot of his takes on things. But they hated him to the point to where they deemed he was worthy to kill. And on top of that, those who disagreed with, many of them who disagreed with him, celebrated. So how do we, what would you say, how do you navigate the impact that the impact, or I would say the massive role that emotions play in this entire conversation? Just your thoughts.
Yeah. No,
I know I said a lot. I get a little wordy at times, but
no, that's okay. And you're completely right. And let me just say this, I'm human, so I will have emotion also. And
absolutely.
and I do have it about certain things, and I have to kind of force myself in a way to let myself have the emotion, and then be like, okay, I'm going to give this some time, and then see how I feel, or what I think about it, and wait for more information or whatever it might be. I think this is getting to something that I tend to touch on in a lot of my content, which is, I think that now, in terms of like the political climate, so many people are, their identity, who they are, is so closely attached to and linked to political parties. And I think, at least this is just my thought process, that it makes sense this way in my mind. I think the more linked you are in that way, the more likely you are going to be defensive or emotional, because it's become very personal. And just to kind of add to that, I think that people can, or at least I believe people can, learn and develop a muscle for this. I believe that you can develop the muscle of kind of turning the emotion down a little bit, and okay, But it is hard, you know, your environment matters a lot too. And if the environment is provoking that, it's going to be really hard to kind of maintain this sort of balanced level state of mind.
I agree. I agree. I think that you had said something a second ago when you talked about identity, the role that people's political perspective is more, it's become, it seems in more recent years it's become more a part of their identity. And I know that personally very well. I have family members in recent years that we just don't communicate anymore, or the
Mm.
communication level is really broken, and that's to a large degree is because we don't see eye to eye on some things. Like, without getting into much detail, I have a family member who's a part of the LGBT community, and she knows exactly where I stand as a Christian, and she's known that for years. It was like never a thing. It was never really an issue. We didn't always see eye to eye, but it was where I stood. And it wasn't like I spoke down to her or belittled her because of it. I said, this is my perspective based on my Christian values. But we would we were able to continue to try to keep our relationship strong. But after the 2024 election, and I was very vocal about my support of Donald Trump, I haven't heard a word from her. Not a peep. I've reached out, no comment, no response back whatsoever. And I know what's at the root of it, because before then we had times in our relationship where it wasn't the greatest, but we always managed to work things out. But this is like the longest period we went without communicating, and it was just like sudden because the communication line was pretty open. And I remember posting a video explaining why I support Donald Trump. After that, she just went radio silent. And I think so when you say how people's political perspective or social perspective is so linked to who they are as a person, I think that has become so prevalent that's more at the forefront now. I can't say whenever, because I know we had times in our country's history where these issues were very, very much at the forefront. I'm reading a book right now called, I think it's called Days of Rage. It's about the political violence in the 60s, when all the bombings were going on. It was like the birth of the Black Panther Party and the, Weather Underground and all that kind of stuff. I'm really digging into that to try to get a good understanding. And a lot of the rhetoric that they used back then is similar to what we're seeing now. You had the young people in the universities and the colleges who are becoming radicalized. You had minorities who are becoming radicalized. The peaceful protests were people were like, why even waste the time with a peaceful protest? We need to force change. And we did force change now. It was the rise of Malcolm X and all these other groups. So the concept of people's perspective, their political views or social views or worldview being tied to who they are, I think, yeah, that's so prevalent. That's at the forefront of what we see nowadays. I don't know if you want to comment on that, respond to that at all.
No, I just think, yeah, exactly. And it's funny. The other day I just did a video kind of comparing a little bit of, or rather speaking to what was happening in our country in the 1960s. And it is true that it's strangely familiar to a lot of the things that are happening now. And just to go to the identity politics, I don't know when this became such a thing. It almost feels like it snuck up on us, but it it's been, increasing over the years. And sometimes I think this is just my personal view, all of these categories that we have and the way that we categorize people and different, by their sexuality and by their group and by their ethnic group. And
Right.
I just feel that, I've always felt like I think that's actually more divisive then I think it's meant to sort of be inclusive, but it results in it being more divisive in my mind, because it forces us then to cling to, you know, the tribe, whatever the tribe is that you're kind of identifying with, you know, speaking to that point of having your identity attached.
Right,
So
right.
I think it can be, I really think this can be dangerous, actually.
I think you're 100% spot on because that's what we've seen in recent years. We've seen people in a quest to be inclusive and open-minded, or whatever, however you want to term it. You see, okay, this person is becomes, especially I like to point out how, like, if you look at the average white guy nowadays, the average white American or white Christian, doesn't have to be Christian necessarily, but if you're if your ancestors are German, English, Nordic, or whatever, and there's like no hint of anything of color in your background, you have people. I think it's gotten so bad where people will gravitate towards something. Oh, that's where the whole non-binary, I'm trans, my pronouns are they, them, or whatever, because they want to belong. Because the white man has become villainized in our modern society. You're the problem. You're the root of every problem when it comes to the primary or a big portion. I don't want to put everyone in the same category, but when it comes to a big portion of the left, if you're just a straight white dude, here's an example. A good friend of mine had a son who was going to a pretty prominent school here in Las Vegas, and his son came to him and was like, "Dad, I want to do a DNA test." And this school he was going to was really steeped in woke culture and social justice, all of that. And he wanted to do a DNA test to see what his background was. And my buddy's got a name that if his last name was any inclination, there's nothing ethnic in him whatsoever, as far as like black or brown, either brown or Hispanic, none of that. So he went and got a DNA test, and his son was just so disappointed. He said his son was really sad. And he was like, "Why are you sad? This is who you are." But he was in that society. He said, "Dad, you don't understand. Everywhere I turn around, everybody's a part of some group. And here I am, just a average white guy." He said, "I can't catch a break. People look at me like I'm part of the problem, and my ancestors are part of every problem." So yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it on that when it comes down to how this attempted diversity has become more of a problem.
Yeah, that's just kind of what I see. And I think, you know, to give them the benefit of the doubt, you know, how this came into being a thing, I think, you know, maybe it started with good intentions. You know, being inclusive that's a good intention. But I think we can just see now we've lived through a period where we can see actually that might have been more divisive. And when you point out differences and you compel people to like cling to those to the others that have that same difference or that same characteristic or whatever it might be, it's just separating. It's just divisive, actually.
Right, right. So let's jump into a little bit more of what's going on right now.
Okay.
So what's your take on, because everybody's talking about ICE, Border Patrol. What's your take on that, and how does that fall into the areas that you like to talk about when it comes down to media and media manipulation? What do you see going on?
Gosh, yeah, honestly, I've been trying to wrap my head around it. I've been considering the full context. So coming off of, you know, just to go back a little bit, coming off of BLM and remembering the whole defund the police thing that was
Mm-hmm.
happening. I already have that context in the back of my mind when I see things happening now. So I think, okay, well, we've already gone through this period where we've villainized all of law enforcement.
Indeed.
So yeah, so then when I'm watching stories now coming up about ICE and I'm seeing how it's being talked about and I'm seeing how it's being reported on, and I just, I can't help but see, okay, everything, at least at the media level, is being framed through, this particular lens that, ICE agents are the villains and they're very much dehumanized, and there seems to be no uh, there seems to be very little explanation even as to what they are dealing with. It seems like everything is just from the other perspective. So but by that, in that same way, I've also tried to consider, okay, but like they could maybe be doing things wrong sometimes, or at
Mhm.
least, so as far as that goes, that's been hard for me to wrap my head around. I don't know enough about how these things should be handled necessarily.
Right, right.
But what I have paid attention to is just been the messaging, and I've been really kind of tuned into that, the messaging about what's happening, and that's what I've talked a little bit about in my content recently.
So what do you see when it comes to the messaging? What are some of the themes that you see consistently over the past year? And especially when it comes to ICE, or yeah, let's stick with the main uh ICE and Border Patrol narrative. What kind of messaging are you seeing different? Because we might talk about the difference. Let's kind of bring it into this. Like when it comes down to the ICE narrative that's being put out there, you recently made a video talking about the difference between in 2016 when Barack Obama was deporting people left and right. It's not anything unusual. Most people know that he was known as the deporter in chief, but the media had a clearly different response when it came down to how Obama did it and the way Trump did it. What do you think has changed? What have you seen different between the messaging? And yeah, just let me know what you think about that.
Yeah, well, yeah, speaking to the clip that you were talking about, um, actually, I think CNN did a ride along with ICE, and it was interesting. I watched that report, and what I found interesting about it was just kind of comparing it to what we hear now. And this report that CNN did was it was from the perspective of ICE, actually. So if I was thinking about it in terms of, my background in film, I would say that they were the protagonist of the story. And that makes a huge difference because as a viewer, you're usually going to automatically relate to the protagonist. So,
The
for
good guy.
instance, right, yeah, so for instance, in this report, they were talking to ICE, they were having conversations. She was doing the ride along with them. She was explaining things that they were going through. Um, the they were kind of expressing, maybe that certain things were difficult, but it was like it was expressed in a way that like there was empathy for them.
Yeah.
And the hostess and the narrator was really kind of telling a story, and just that alone is just completely different from what you see now. And I mean, now ICE is the villain, and now they're, very much dehumanized, and you're not. It seems that the reporting now is very much from the perspective of what would be the undocumented immigrants, and yeah, so I've just been kind of noticing that, and I was like, well, this is very different. But I think that difference speaks to kind of the broader changes that have been happening, and like I said, especially since BLM and all of that. So yeah, I definitely have noticed it, and I think, there seems to be very little empathy for what the agents are also experiencing. And we do know that they are experiencing quite a lot.
I think, yeah, there's definitely that. I think those of us who want to know, who are inquisitive, know that. I think that there has been a large media blackout, especially on the mainstream side, as to exactly what these officers, these agents are having to deal with. I saw a recent video where, I don't know if you saw it. I only saw it on X, and I always tell people, X can be a headache. You can get a lot of foolishness on X, but when you want to know what's happening, like at that moment with a particular story, I go there automatically. I go to
Yeah.
X automatically, and I just start.
Yeah.
I type in whatever topic. If it's the latest shooting, because somebody's going to post a video about it online. When
Yeah.
Charlie Kirk got shot, I said, okay, Charlie Kirk was speaking. He's one of the most viral guys in recent years. When he was speaking, I went to X and I said, somebody there had their camera up during this shooting. So I went there and I saw, and I've seen a lot of death and I've seen a lot of tragedy throughout the course of my career. And as soon as I saw what happened to him, I was like, barring a miracle, a true work of God, this man's not going to make it. It was just so obvious when I saw the footage. But
Yeah.
I had to go out of my way in order to find it. So I think, back to my main point, I think that in order to keep people in the dark and kind of dumb and kind of mindless, I think that there's an intentional media. This is just my opinion. I think there's an intentional media blackout. Back to what I was saying a moment ago, there was a video I saw of a vehicle, I think it was Border Patrol ICE vehicle, being tore open. Somebody attached the back door to their vehicle and ripped the back door off, and then they yanked out this big. In tactical vehicles, they have what is almost like a toolkit in the back of a lot of tactical vehicles, and they ripped it out, ripped it open, broke the lock. Dude had all his personal belongings in there, his wallet, stuff like that, his weapons. He had AR-15, some handguns, some ammo, all kinds of tactical tools. And then all these rioters just went in there and just started jacking stuff and taking things away. I think that largely, and I can't say 100% because I don't watch CNN except for the occasional news clip, or I don't watch MSNBC at all except for the occasional news clip, or any of the main alphabet news outlets, ABC, NBC, CNN, CBS. So I can't say with 100% certainty, but from what I have seen, or even some of the conversations I've had with people, most people are completely unaware of stuff like that. So I think that you have there's a large group of people who really don't know what these agents are putting up with. And I think that goes back to something I saw in one of your older videos, or not too old. It may have been like 2 weeks old. This whole dehumanizing. You did a video talking about the Renee Good, how they were talking about her background, and she loved poetry and she loved to sing, and she had 3 kids. She was a mom. And the way the media talked about the agent who shot her. If you want to go into a little detail, that's what I see. A little bit of what I kind of broke it down. I kind of said a lot of it, but if you want to elaborate a bit on that.
Yeah. So you're referring to the video that I went into AI and I asked AI just to source facts linked up with sources and tell me just plain, no interpretation of anything. Just tell me how many distinct human details that across of the major networks were reported on about Renee Good. And then I asked it to do that for, I believe his name was Jonathan Ross.
Honestly, I didn't even know that. I didn't even know his name.
Okay.
And I mean, this is
I
an
think
area.
I think it's Jonathan Ross.
Yeah, this is the area that I dig into as former law enforcement, and I had no clue as to his name. Now, there could be multiple reasons for that, from a law enforcement perspective, you don't want to dox the guy, but I think it happened anyway. But back to what you were saying, as far as the what you saw when you asked AI those questions.
Yeah, no, that's true, and that's another aspect of it. But I wanted to show just kind of a high level view of what's being reported on across all of these major networks and publications, and it seemed kind of as clear as day. And this was really within the first, I want to say 72 hours of when it happened, that there was something like I I don't remember exactly. I think maybe 24 or 26 distinct details about Renee Good. And there were, I believe, 6 or 7 about the ICE agent. And the ICE agent's details were all kind of resume based type of information, just kind of based on his career, how long he's been working with ICE, or that he was an Iraq war veteran, stuff like that, but nothing personally. And I was making I just really was making the point that if you want to humanize someone, you give them what they were giving Renee Good, which was, all of this backstory and all of these kind of accounts from friends and family. And they said this about her. And I'm not saying anything negative about, I'm not saying any of that was wrong. Just pointing out the fact that, she was getting all of this extra coverage about who she was and kind of testament to her character and, all of these words and descriptions steeped in emotion and color, and you really start to immediately gravitate towards that person and relating to that person. Whereas with the ICE agent, it was so distant and cold and almost nothing available there. And it just, so in that video, I was just making that point that this is how you humanize someone and this is how you dehumanize someone.
Wow. Here's a clip that I cut, or a image that I cut. It was a CNN headline here. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Mother of 3 who loved to sing and write poetry, shot and killed by ICE in Minneapolis. As soon as I saw that, I was thinking to myself, now, I wonder what they said, because I didn't go back and look. I should have. I wonder what they said about Charlie Kirk, for instance, when he got shot. If I recall, from what I can recall, it was more of far right speaker or controversial right-wing speaker, Charlie Kirk shot and killed. It was something to intentionally frame the narrative that he got killed. It's tragic, but who was this guy? He's not really anybody you should be feeling too sympathetic for, because far right wing has been villainized in our modern society completely, especially from the perspective of the mainstream. And when I saw this, I actually did a video. I haven't put the video out yet, but I saw that. I'm like, dude, like, can you be any more clear that you're trying to convince people to feel a certain way? And again, my thoughts are a little different as former law enforcement, a guy who used to train police when it comes to tactics and things like that, and defensive tactics. My thoughts when it comes to her, and again, you don't have to agree, my thoughts when it comes down to Renee Good and even Alex Preddy was that these people intentionally put themselves in a position and acted in such a way where they brought harm to themselves. I'm not celebrating what happened to them. I'm not trying to I'm not trying to say it's a good thing. But when you put yourself in harm's way by trying to physically get away from the police or physically restrain the police, whether you're using a firearm or whether you're using a 4,000 or 4,000 pound vehicle, bad things can happen. I had mentioned earlier that my content was initially based on police interactions, and time again, I said the same thing. And it applies in both these situations. Again, nobody's celebrating what happened to them. But when you attempt to resist, when you attempt to flee law enforcement, you open the door for any number of scenarios to take place. And oftentimes they don't end well. So your best bet would be to don't impede, don't get in the way. But that the main story of from a major news outlet, and we know they're biased, they try to say that they're not, but it's abundantly clear, is that Mother 3, who loved to sing and write poetry, there's an agenda behind it.
Oh yeah, very clearly. And another thing that I was seeing them mentioning across different publications were they were saying they said it about Renee Good, but I think they said it about other people too, where they were saying things like, oh, they were just on their way to a doctor's appointment and this happened, where she just dropped off her son, and they were making it sound as if these people are just doing regular everyday life things, and ICE agents are coming in and terrorizing them. And I thought, well, there's a big piece of the story missing there.
Right.
Yeah.
I heard Tim Walz say a guy who was just leaving the store to get a cup of coffee gets gunned down by the police.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, I get so frustrated by that kind of rhetoric. That kind of rhetoric is so dangerous. And you brought this up consistently during our conversation just today, that you saw a lot of similarities with the entire BLM narrative. They're almost identical. The playbook is identical. It's dehumanize certain branches of law enforcement, minimize the activity or the situation that put that individual in harm's way, totally minimize it or just discount it. It's a non-factor. This off the top of my head, let me have you seen the most recent footage of what's his name? Alex Preddy? Have you seen the most recent videos of him? It was a previous interaction that he had.
I think I did, but I'm not sure if it's the one you're talking about. Go ahead.
I'm gonna
show it.
I'm gonna pull that up. I'm gonna pull it up and see and just get your whatever comes to your mind, your thoughts on it. Hopefully, you don't feel as if I'm putting you on the spot or anything like that.
That's okay.
I think you can handle it.
I can.
There are a couple of takes, there are a couple of videos, and let me see if I can find. Oh, I want to do this here. Let me share. I'm going to share a video from, I think it's Anna Navarro. Is that her from The View? Are you familiar with her?
No, I know The View, but I'm not sure who that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I know The View too. So
yeah.
But let me share this take from this lady right here.
Okay, I remember her face. Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. I'm gonna make this larger here. We're just kind of. All right, let's just play.
They chose to they killed the wrong guy, right? Because this is like the perfect guy. Alex Preddy is the guy you would want to date your daughter. The guy you would want your son to grow up to be, a decent human being who was serving humanity, serving sick veterans, who is, there is nothing that has been said about that man that isn't wonderful. And so they can't malign him. They can't malign him because we have the videos.
All right. So we got this. We have that. So hopefully this is all still on the screen here. Yeah, I'm scrolling through here. I just want to make sure everything pops up. All right. Just double checking, making sure it's looking good. All right. Let me know if you can hear everything. Okay, the guy's yelling at the ICE agents, Border Patrol guys, guy in the brown, that has been determined to be Alex Preddy.
Look at you! Pepper spray, bitch! Fucking something, motherfucker! Fuck you guys! Fucking crap!
So this is the guy they were saying is the one that you want to date your daughter. Here's another angle of the same video. You're going to see a little bit more of what he does here. Are you still with me?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a moment the news movement filmed on January 13th in Minneapolis, showing a man who appears to be Alex Preddy interacting with federal immigration agents 11 days before Border Patrol shot and killed him. Our footage was analyzed by the BBC, whose facial recognition technology confirmed his identity to a 97% degree of accuracy. On the morning of January 13th, our team received a tip that federal agents were blocking a street at the corner of East 36th and Park Avenue in Minneapolis. We arrived around 10:15 a.m. We saw observers shouting at the agents as they walked back to their vehicles. When they started driving away, the man kicked their taillight. An agent then got out of the vehicle, grabbed him, and pushed him to the ground. During the altercation, agents fired tear gas and pepper balls into the crowd. They continued to hold the man down before they retreat and he walks away. The man in our footage is wearing a similar outfit to what Preddy was wearing on the day he was killed. What appears to be a gun is also visible above his waistband.
All right. What are your thoughts? I know, I don't know if have you seen this previously?
I'd seen, so this second clip that you showed me, I did see that one, but I hadn't seen the first one from the other angle.
So what we heard was him basically cussing and screaming at the officers, saying, "Assault me." And then before the door closes, he spits, hocks a loogie into the police vehicle. And what did we see just a moment ago with Ana Navarro sitting at a CNN panel? And there's also another clip that I didn't show, but it's Elizabeth Warren saying how he was such a good guy and there was nothing bad about him. But you hear the clear media spin of this entire take. But again, I'm not saying that the two automatically equate that he deserved what happened to him. I'm not saying that, even though I do believe that his actions, my personal opinion, his actions were the primary catalyst that resulted in his death. That's my personal opinion. You don't have to agree with that, but that's my personal take. But back to the main point is the narrative that they were trying to share or trying to put forward. ICU nurse, worked for the VA. They show a picture of him. I've even heard that they doctored the footage, the image, his picture. Like they made his nose look a little smaller. They made him look a little more handsome. That's what people are saying. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing. I haven't confirmed that 100%, but I saw the pictures and I see some subtle differences between the photo. And people are saying that the media photoshopped the footage to make him look more presentable or more attractive, so people would be more sympathetic to him. I can't confirm that 100%.
Okay.
But just seeing what you saw, just seeing what you see, and being that this is the area, this is your topic, this is the area that you primarily focus on. What's your take on this?
Gosh, it's kind of like I don't know. I see this in sort of layers, because if I look at it just in terms of the media, so the media is always going to race, just by the nature of our media, they're going to race to legitimize something or to spin something or to have, and that's clearly what was happening. By the same token, the government also, I think Kristi Noem came out and also tried to kind of play that narrative war also.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Yeah. So, but ultimately, yes, the prevailing story was, that he was, I'm kind of, it's a sensitive topic. I don't think that, I'm split on this, because I think that he did put himself in harm's way, but I don't think that should ever result in him being killed. But, these things get messy. But speaking to Yeah, but speaking to kind of the narrative sort of collapsing, it's interesting because it collapsed in just a few days. Uh, I remember I remember when the George Floyd thing happened, and I remember that there was extra footage, like body cam footage and all of that that came out, but it came out months later, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And by that point, things had gotten, pretty crazy. But in this instance, within a few days, extra footage came out. So I think on one hand, that's okay, that's good. We can kind of, but that's also not the thing that's also not what's going to be blasted all over the media as was, the first impression sticks.
Yeah, and they do a
So,
masterful job of putting out the initial narrative that they want to spin. And just like you said, unfortunately, that's the one that people remember. That's the main
and
one. People are going to think about what happened to him and the fact that he shouldn't. It all they won't even consider the fact that he might have been culpable for, in a
right,
lot of people's minds.
right. Yes, exactly. And they have, gosh, when you think about the legacy media, the power they have, it extends beyond the US. That's another thing. Um, reports from our mainstream media goes out globally. It goes out, goes to Europe. And, to have a message go that fast and that big, it's really powerful. I mean, it creates a perception within the US, but it creates a perception out of the US too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfortunate when that perception is maybe not even based on a complete view of the reality and right
Yeah.
and facts. And again, this just goes to, relying on the emotional aspect of, using all of this emotional language and, just to kind of to tell a story. Ultimately, it's storytelling, and that happens a lot. And this is one example of that.
Yeah, I just saw that, and I plan on going live again this afternoon to talk about that video, and because I really want that to get out there. I've said it time and time again. I don't know what it is about us. I can't say I don't know. I think to some degree, because we've kind of talked about it, just how a lot of times we're driven by emotion and everyone's affected by it. But you would think that in light of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, George Floyd, Jacob Blake, Renee Good, all these different situations that we've seen in recent years, where there was an initial narrative that was put forth, and everyone responded and came to their conclusions without knowing all the details, and then more content comes out, however much later, and it sheds a completely different light on the situation. I would argue that the Michael Brown case was one of the most prevalent ones, because I don't know if there was even any body cam footage at all, but it was a long time before we realized that he had just robbed a store previously to that, used physical force, which is a felony offense. A robbery is in Nevada language, when it comes to our Nevada laws, using force or violence, fear of injury, immediate or future. When you do commit any crime, but there's a threat of force or violence, or actual force or violence. So in the video, you see Michael Brown trying to steal some cigarettes and then push the store owner down. Automatic felony offense. And then there was the narrative of the hands up, don't shoot, which after the Obama-led Department of Justice investigated, come to find out that was just completely made up. That was never factual whatsoever. And
Really?
yeah, you can go look it up right now. The whole report by Eric Holder and his Department of Justice at the time said that one of Michael Brown's friends admitted to making that up. And then other people in Ferguson who said, if I was that cop, I would have shot him too, because he was fighting that officer and trying to take his gun. But then they also said that if you ever try to make me go to court or ever try to say, get me to admit what I just told you, I'll never admit it, because they were terrified of the response around them. And there were like wanted posters put up around Ferguson saying snitches get stitches, basically warning people from speaking up and telling the police what actually happened. Did that ever make the mainstream? Nope. None of that, hardly. Of course, as time went on, people, I think most people, or a good percentage of people, still think that the officer wrongfully killed Michael Brown without knowing the details, because that narrative was so much at the forefront. The hands up, don't shoot. I saw people doing that at a protest just a couple of days ago in Minneapolis. Hands up, don't shoot. It's ingrained in people's minds. It's that control that they have in that initial story. And it just really, really frustrates me when I see these things over and over again. I try to talk about it, and but again, my platform is only so large. Folks like us try to talk about it, and maybe as time goes on, more people will be more open to actually listening.
Yeah. Really, I agree. Yeah, there's something to be said about that initial first impression. When something happens, it's blasted at the rooftops. It goes out everywhere. And a lot of people don't follow up with that. They just run with that. And
what do you think motivates people? Do you think people just, once they get something that kind of supports their perspective, they're good, they don't really care about anything else? Do you think it's just a natural tendency that we all have, or do you think it's more prominent on the other side, or what are your thoughts? Or on either side? Or you think it's just pretty much everybody?
No, I mean, I definitely think, yes, I do think, confirmation bias, right? People are more inclined to believe something that supports their beliefs already. There is something in us that likes to be, we want our views to be reinforced. It's a very hard thing to, to be willing to, to be willing to be wrong, or, that's a hard thing, and increasingly harder, it seems, in the climate now.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. Let me share one thing. I mentioned how you had shared something from Van Jones on X, and Lord knows the last thing I thought I'd be doing was sharing something from Van Jones on my page. But I took the time to read it, and I was just like, man, you a broken clock. That's what I thought of. That's what I thought. A broken clock could be right twice a day. I'm just not the biggest fan of Van Jones personally, but
no, I was surprised. I was surprised by it too, honestly.
Yeah, that's probably
but
why.
I read it and I thought, well, there you go. I appreciated that article at least.
Hold on, let me see if I can pull this up here. I thought I'd saved it. Then go to your page here. There we go. All right, here we go. Okay. Hopefully that's big enough. Yeah, I think the audience should be able to see it. Let me read it. When we're arguing about ICE, we're not actually arguing about immigration policy. We're arguing about legitimacy. And we're doing it while watching two completely different movies. I spent the last week really listening to the voices on all sides of this conflict: ICE, protesters, conservatives, progressives, undocumented families, police officers, government officials. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Each side thinks it is the reasonable one. Each side thinks the other side is lying or insane. And each side, at some level, actually has a point. Conservatives see law enforcement under attack. Progressives see unchecked federal power running roughshod over neighborhoods. Same events, totally different data sets and frameworks. This outcome isn't by accident. Algorithms are feeding us different videos, headlines, and emotional cues. Again, we're not watching the same movie. From inside the conservative worldview, if enforcement fails, we lose our country. Blocking ICE looks like blocking firefighters. From inside the progressive worldview, if ICE overreach isn't resisted now, authoritarianism becomes normal. Not protesting feels like surrendering democracy. Neither side is pretending. Both are reacting to real fears, but both are missing critical parts of the picture. Here's a test of good faith when discussing the ICE issue. Can you name the other side's deepest fear in the way they agree is fair? Drop your best shot in the comments below. We can have constitutional enforcement and legitimate protest, safety and freedom, but not if we keep letting social media trick us into believing the absolute worst about everyone who disagrees with us. What made you, it's pretty obvious. I mean, there was a lot going on there, but what made you just decide you wanted to share that?
I just really like the way he wrote it. And, he said he breaks it mostly into like left or right, but he says, each side is watching a different movie, and it's so true. It's, not only within the media that you consume at the legacy media level, but within your echo chambers in social media. And I really believe that that is what's driving a lot of the division as well, is like these echo chambers that people are in, just kind of seeing one view. And I don't know, I appreciated that he spent the time and then wrote about, here's what the left is feeling, and really empathizing with that. And here's what the right is feeling, and empathizing with that. And I just appreciated someone bringing that to, bring that discussion up. And I really think, we're at a point where I think we need to try to see those that we disagree with as try to see their humanity. And, and that goes both ways, right? That goes for the left to see the right as their humanity. And, just ultimately, I think, once you get rid of these labels like left or right, we're all humans. We're all, we all desire a lot of the same things. And so, yeah, I reposted that just because I appreciated that perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really difficult because I'm just going to be honest with you. When I see these people screaming in these ICE agents' faces, and the spitting and the physical attacks that oftentimes are hidden from the media, and of course I have my bias. I never hide that. I'm a very conservative man. Years in law enforcement, yes. But if I often pride myself on seeking to understand my opponent, or seeking to understand people's perspective.
Right.
And I'm not saying that you're saying this, but I know people want to make it out to be, both sides are, there's no wrong per se. And again, I'm not saying that that's not what you're saying. I think there is right and wrong, but it's largely based on worldview. What's your worldview? What perspective are you looking at this, or looking at, from what perspective are you viewing this? But when I see people who have this, and I know, of course, they'll agree, they'll think that what they're doing is right. There's a lot of very far left activist individuals, Marxists, socialists, who hate America. They hate capitalism. They hate everything associated with our current government, the way we run, the way we operate. And nothing would please them more but to see our whole society collapse. So then they can bring in their their socialism, their Marxist worldview, and they think. And I even believe, though, even though I say that, I even believe that they're coming from a place where they think what they're doing is good. But I also think at times when history is examined, a lot of people just don't want to acknowledge the reality. Anytime you see someone bring up, well, socialism never works. Let's use that as an example. You bring that up.
Yeah.
Socialism has never worked anywhere historically. A lot of times you'll hear the same thing repeated. Well, that time wasn't real socialism. No, regardless of whenever you see it collapse and fail, they'll say that there was another reason involved. I think worldview plays such a factor that people, again, they're so emotionally locked into their perspective that you can show them all the evidence in the world that what they believe is false, but they'll still reject it. But I do agree that it's good to know the other side. I don't ever want to get caught being one of those ones who promotes a story just because it's, again, confirmation bias, as you mentioned earlier. I don't ever want to get caught. And I've found myself doing that in the past. I'll repost something and somebody will say, Eric, did you fact check that? And I'm like, man, I'm usually the guy to challenge people on that. But there have been times where I'm like, yeah, I didn't fact check that. Let me take it down until I can confirm it or something like that. But
yeah,
I think when it's all said and done, a lot of times it goes back to, I think foundationally is worldview. Like, what's your worldview? That's the biggest factor. You're a Marxist? Are you a socialist? Are you a capitalist? Are you Christian? Are you an atheist? Are you an evolutionist? Or whatever you said. I think everything, I think it was Andrew Breitbart who said everything is downstream, like from culture. And wherever you start at the top, everything flows down. So I think that we need to be very knowledgeable of the opposition, know what they believe and know what motivates them and know why they believe it. I think that'll put us in a better position to be able to challenge them and to even have a level of empathy or sympathy, for lack of a better term, or I'll at least say this, understanding. At least, because I find myself really getting in, like, sometimes I'm hearing these people and I be praying like, Lord, I don't want to hate these people, but I really struggle at times not to hate some of these people when I see them acting so violently and being so misguided. You got a whole bunch of people who died because of these illegals. I say illegals. I know you said undocumented, but you've had many people who have died and suffered as a result of all these illegal aliens coming into our country.
Yeah.
And they're completely overlooked. My thing is, can you at least, if you can at least acknowledge what's going on the other side, I think you might have a different take. Maybe I'm wrong with that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, I agree. And, speaking to that, it's like, I do think also that, there's going to be radicals, right? There's always going to be the radicals on either side. And those people are honestly the hardest people to reach. And, but I think, this, what I was talking about is like, at least the people that still have some rationality or still have some, but it is true that, our politics and our culture has also pushed people into these radical spaces. And now, those are also the loudest people. But
they get the most attention. That's what goes in my mind typically when I think about people on the left, and that's also influence. I'm even a victim of that because I have to pray. Honestly, I've added these people on the left, people like your Don Lemon types, like, that dude just like, rubs me so raw. And I actually had to add him on my prayer list so I don't develop an unreasonable hate towards somebody. Like, you can hate some of their actions, and the Bible says, be angry and do not sin. That's my goal. Like, I don't mind. There's such a thing as a good, righteous anger. But if it gets to the point to where maybe you dehumanize somebody, or, you get to a point to where it becomes obsessive, then it becomes problematic. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, but I want to just kind of, to what you're saying right now, this is so interesting because you bring up like the faith aspect.
Yes.
And I think the faith is it's so important. And this is something that, you being a man of faith, I think people with that level of faith frequently check themselves, I think. I
Yeah,
don't
we
want to make
try.
a blanket statement. I don't want to make a blanket statement, but
Right.
but it's been interesting to kind of see the progression of our country and our society and our culture, and how we've lost faith in a lot of our culture. And I
Yeah.
think that for a lot of people, politics have become their faith.
No question.
And
No question.
yeah, and that, I think, ties into that radicalized mentality. And I think, how unfortunate that is, because that, I think, is one of the big barriers between, knowing or wanting to know someone that disagrees with you, because now it's become like a belief system or a religion, and I don't know, but yeah, so that just came to my mind as you were talking about that, and hearing your perspective as, really relying on your faith and adding Don Lemon to your prayer list. It's like, there's something really, really beneficial for having that faith outside of the country, outside of, our culture and our politics. You have kind of a higher power that you're speaking to, which is, I think, really, really special, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like, for me, that's where everything flows from. Like, everything flows from that. And yeah, it's like, since post 9/11, we went on a really downward. I would say before that, I would say, just as you were mentioning in one of your videos, and we were talking about earlier, the sexual revolution, the free love, like in the 60s, we really started shifting more towards a more me-centered perspective on things. And
Yeah.
And of course, there were excesses, as you referenced in your video, from all sides. When people get in power, they
Yeah.
overreaches flow, oftentimes, sadly.
Yeah.
And even people go back to like the 90s, where you had like the moral majority and things like that. You had people really trying to enforce certain aspects of it, but then there was this natural cultural rebellion. And I think it's constant up and down. It's like a constant seesaw. There's overcorrections every single time. I honestly believe, as much as I'm a Trump supporter, I believe Trump was an overcorrection because of all the radical leftist transitioning your kids. And if you don't agree with gay marriage, you're evil, you're a homophobe, you're belittled, as opposed to, these are my Christian values, and this is what I hold dear. And this is just as much as you hold your perspective in high regard, that's where I stand. It used to be, you can believe what you want. We just may not see things eye to eye. Now it's, you need to be silenced. Your worldview is dangerous, and will cancel you for not believing the way we believe. And it's every time you turn around, what we're going through even right now, I would argue, and let me know what your thoughts are. Even these ICE riots and protests are an overcorrection to Trump. Every time Trump I can't say it's Trump's fault, but Trump is so brash and he speaks crazy.
Yeah.
Like I said, that's my president. I love him, but sometimes I wish he would just shut up sometimes and just kind of chill out a little bit and let JD Vance or let Marco Rubio talk, because he's not the best speaker in the world. He's actually a crappy speaker. Let's be honest with you. But that's still my boy. I still appreciate him. I still love him personally. But he makes things worse sometimes with a lot of the rhetoric that he speaks. And so we're constantly in this back and forth. You know, you have your Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is of the world. He's an overcorrection. It's just like this constant universal struggle that we will always go through.
It does, yes, I've noticed that too. And I've tried to wrap my head around it. It's like, why does the pendulum always have to swing so far the other way? What is it that we can't kind of, and I try to think, was there a time in our history where we were kind of balanced? Was there some semblance of harmony? I think I think so on some level, but
I don't
now,
know.
I, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Oh, maybe you're right. I'm just
But
saying when I'm like a lay student of history. I just love reading books about history. And when I'm reading through my Bible, when Solomon said in Ecclesiastes, "There's nothing new under the sun," and this is thousands of years ago, he wrote
yeah,
this, and he talks about how the nature of man. When you see people canceling went on, Jesus was canceled, for instance.
yeah,
They didn't
that's
like what he
true.
said. He was vilified. They twisted his words and they killed him for it because they hated what he was saying. They didn't believe him. But I think that, and then when I read the founding fathers, a lot of what was going on culturally, there was a lot of the same thing going on then. So
Yeah,
I think there may be varying levels of intensity of the canceling and the correcting and overcorrecting, but I think it's just the natural state of mankind. You have extremes, and you'll have your extremes on either side, and then you have the people who are a little more in the middle, and people who may lean a little further left or right.
right.
And the extreme people are the ones that are heard the most often, and that basically puts us where we are, like on a constant basis. It's usually
Exactly.
because on the left, it's it's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease, or the closed
Yeah,
mouth doesn't get fed. As my mom used to say back in the day, it's the
yeah,
loudest voice. Those are the ones you listen to on either side. That's why Trump draws so much ire and attention, because he's like one of the loudest voices. He doesn't represent, like, honestly, Trump isn't really that conservative. Trump is like
yeah,
politically, he's more in the middle. I wish he was more conservative personally. Those are my thoughts. But
yeah.
uh, just the rhetoric is what gets me half the time. What are your
Oh
thoughts?
gosh. No, yeah, definitely. Definitely. And as it ties to like the I stuff that's happening now, and there's also Trump, and also some of the, I don't know if this the White House on X and like on social media, they were also posting like memes and kind of making fun of deporting people, or at least turning it into like a cartoon. I
Yeah,
don't think, that didn't play well either. It's just like, I don't know how we got here. I remember there being a time where like religion and politics were just something you didn't really talk about.
right.
Um, Maybe there was a bit more social cohesion in that time. Now it's, now there's pressure to talk about it, right?
Yeah, and
So
you can't be silent nowadays. You have to take a stance, and we saw that probably most prominently in 2020. You had
yeah,
to take a side. COVID, the riots going on around the country, the Black Square. But I was already in my rebellious stage and had gotten canceled and unfriended by some of my old friends. So I was kind of numb to it, and I was being more vocal. There's a part of me
yeah,
that wants to speak more when I'm told to shut up. There's a part of me that's like, no, I'm not shutting up, because I feel like my perspective, I actually take time to understand your perspective. Can you say the same for me? That's what I say to my opponent. Can you say the same for me? Plenty of times I'm
yeah,
having conversation with my wife, and I'm like, she'll say something, and I'll say, well, they would say, and I'll give the perspective of the other side. I really try to understand where they're coming from, what
yeah,
frames them, what motivates them. And I think that if we can't do that as a society, as individuals, again, Van Jones hit the nail on the head. Can you honestly frame your opponent? Doesn't mean you have to even remotely agree with them, but can you at least say you understand where they're coming from? Like,
yeah,
I listen to people that like sometimes I'm like, it disgusts me hearing what your take, but I do it because I want to know, like, what's your
yeah,
motivation? Like, what gets you out of bed? Everyone likes to think that these people, like, they're mostly paid protesters. No, these people have turned this, as you mentioned, it's like their religious beliefs. Protests,
right,
getting together is like going to church. To
yeah,
them, this is life or death. And this is this country that they envision. That's what they want to see. And if we don't understand that, there can never be any kind of victory. We can never be able to really quell the radicals that are out there, because they're the ones that are leading, especially on the left when it comes to the party. The radicals are the ones that are leading the party around. I know
that is very true.
I want to we're getting close to closing here. Let me ask you, and I'll just let you flow with it. I won't interrupt this time. I apologize if I interrupt.
No, that's okay.
What's if from your perspective, what can we do to minimize, to the best of our ability, the media influences that are out there trying to get us to believe things one way, shape, or form? What's the remedy from your perspective?
Oh gosh, let's see. I think it's learning how it works. So it's like it's kind of getting a muscle for being able to pick apart and see what they're doing. You know, just like for instance, me working in marketing and working in copywriting, I'm able to see the mechanics. I mean, you know, marketing still works on me because I'm still human, but a lot of times I go into it knowing what I'm doing. Like, oh, okay, I see what they did there, but I still want that thing. You know?
Right.
Right. You know, but I feel personally that I have some kind of advantage because I can see it and I know it. And I know what's happening and I can see, you know, this goes back also to just me being in film school, because that was what we did. We would pick apart films and we would say, you know, we would look at the construction of it. Like you would look at the lighting and what it's supposed to kind of convey in that moment. And
that's good.
You know, how something reveals, you know, how the slightest movement reveals something about a character and how that actually moves the story forward. So when you learn those things, I think you're able then to kind of, when because we're being bombarded with media. I mean, media is everything. We're getting stuff on our phones throughout the day. We get headlines, we get, you know, the news and everything. And I just think, you know, one great way to start with that is just learning how to pick that apart, analyze it, and see what the intention is behind it. Notice word choices and notice what it does. And, you know, it's a very analytical approach. And, you know, I think, of course, as you were saying earlier, it's easier said than done. But I do think that is one really powerful way to combat this, is just awareness and, you know, educating yourself and really looking, because, you know, just from my background in film, I can look at something that's done in journalism and I can see the storytelling actually that's there. And I can see, you know, what I'm meant to feel, because I know those tricks from, you know, from film. And so, yeah. And, you know, that's just speaking to a little bit of what I talk about on my channel. I think that's, you know, the kind of thing that when you learn, you really get the tools. You know, you have the tools in your tool belt. You can learn how to analyze those things. You can learn how to interpret what it's supposed to mean, and kind of the way that they're steering you with certain word choices or even certain camera angles. Even camera angles, you know, can give you some indication of what you're supposed to be feeling. So, yeah, I think that's a great place to start. Just,
wow.
You know.
Yeah, just your last take opened my eyes to something that I may notice in a movie, but just hearing you articulate it was just like, even the camera angle or the lighting or the style of music that's used when a certain character comes on the screen as opposed to another, and how that to some degree can be applied to our culture when it comes to the media influences and whatnot. I would just add also, it's something simple, but read past the headline. Don't just read the headline. And again, we're being bombarded by news stories left and right, and also be willing to listen. I know it may nauseate some of us out there, but be willing to read an article or listen to the opposing view, because the story, the truth may be somewhere in the middle, or one side could be ignoring one crucial factor over another. We're at a good time now. You have different news outlets. I'm not sponsored by anybody right now, but like Ground News, there's, last I checked, Straight Arrow News. I haven't checked their website lately. People were complaining that they might have been shifting a little left. I don't know. But there are news outlets out there that try to give you a perspective, and they'll tell you which side is reporting more on this story. And you'll see some stories that the left ignores, and you see some stories that the right ignores. But be open to looking at things from a different perspective, and don't be captivated by a news headline. And I think but in this day and age where we're being overwhelmed by media, it's easy to just see a headline, whether it's a thumbnail on the YouTube video, a title on the YouTube video, or a news article, just see the headline, just move past it, and you've already come to your conclusion as to what actually happened. It's pretty unfortunate.
I completely agree with everything that you just said. Absolutely. I say, your algorithm can get you stuck to where you're just seeing more and more of what you already believe. So definitely recommend people going to the other side, whatever your other side is. Go to the other side and see what they're saying about the same thing that, that you might be hearing from whoever you get your news from. Now go see what the other side is saying about it, because, sometimes it's actually quite enlightening. They point something out that you're like, oh, well, this other person didn't say that, so I didn't know that was, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily to change your mind. It could just be, okay, I just learned a little bit more. And I just, I could, now I grew up, like I said, I spent most of my life being a Democrat. So I kind of already know how they think, but I still think it's good to be willing to say, let me at least understand what they're trying to say, or if there's some facts here that I'm not aware of, because there've been times where, I'm wrong. I think I already know all the details, but I've been wrong on things like that. And we have to be willing to admit that. But Vanessa, has been awesome having you on. Where can my followers find you on whatever social media site that you're currently on? Where are you at?
Oh gosh, thank you, Eric. It's been really, really great. You can find me. I think I have it there on my name on YouTube at that Vanessa M, and I think it's the same on X as well. And I also have a Substack link on my YouTube, so you can find me there too.
Awesome. Let me throw this up here real quick. My man, there's a good friend of mine on Facebook. He said, I heard you mention Van Jones and I was ready to keep scrolling. When I decided to listen to you read what he said. Eric, glad I waited. And I know Arreste, I hope I said his name right. I know he and I agree almost all the time, just on social media. And I know he's very conservative minded, man. But sometimes you have to be willing to just open your mind and just listen. Don't mean you have to. And trust me, there are many times where I won't even do a video, because if it's something that's viral and everybody's talking about something that Whoopi Goldberg said on The View, I'm like, I don't even want to make the video because I don't want to even hear what she has to say. But I also think it's good at times to do that. And I force myself sometimes to do that. And this is a good example right here of where listening to a different side may not change your mind, but it could be encouraging. Like, I don't think Van Jones is going to become conservative anytime soon, but at least he was honest enough to say that we both could be missing the mark in some degree, to some extent.
Yeah.
Now, I don't believe it's just the truth is in the middle and I don't believe that. I believe truth is there's truth and then there are falsehoods. But I do also believe that there can be some, aspects of it that we may all be missing.
I agree.
Anyway, all right, Vanessa, it has been awesome. Again, folks, do me a favor. If you're going to go follow her, don't just follow her to follow her. Go follow her and listen and watch her content. Because actually, if you just follow somebody and you don't interact or view their stuff, it actually is detrimental when it comes to the algorithm. So if you're going to follow her because you enjoy the conversation here or you're interested in what she has to say, and just check out her content. You will appreciate it, and you can thank me later. But as always, y'all, stay safe, God bless, and make sure you join the conversation. Take care.